I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week we'll be talking about how the shutdown is seeping into everyone's lives and a conversation with Congressman Johnny O. After that, we'll be talking about our lives on the Hill.
Welcome back, everybody. It is now day 34 of the shutdown.
Yep.
And I don't even know what to say about that, to be quite honest. I think it's just kind of crazy that we're here. We've talked about it a lot on the show. And I think that day 34 is kind of a big turning point because, the record for the longest shutdown is this week.
Yes.
Whether it's tomorrow, whether it's the day after, we'd have to really pinpoint the time that it started. But I think that it's very crazy that we got to here.
I know, I never thought that I would be covering a government shutdown, much less the longest in history. And so I think that it is a little bit surreal. We went through multiple funding fights that didn't end up in a government shutdown. Yeah. So I never really realized that we would get to that point where we were, one, covering a shutdown, and two, covering a record-breaking shutdown.
And we've covered a lot of records this year, which we've talked about. Too many. The House needs to stop. Congress itself needs to stop. There's too many records. But we've talked about this before, the floor speeches and reconciliation and rule votes and whatnot. There's been so many record-breaking things that have happened. And I think that the unfortunate part about this particular record-breaking incident is that now on day 34, I think, in my opinion, and maybe in yours as well, is that now the shutdown, I think, is seeping into everybody's lives.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, the first 15 days, the biggest thing that we talked about was the military not getting paid. And government employees were kind of concerned they weren't going to get paid, but they still had some hope.
And there were some caveats there. The administration found some research and development funding that hadn't been used to fund part of the military. A few weeks back, they got a $130 million anonymous donation.
Right.
I mean, obviously they know who it is. We don't know who it is.
But
I've looked into it a little bit. But there have been caveats here and there that have given some levy to the military pay. But now that military pay deadline passed and there's been some funding there is whenever we're really feeling the effects to the rest of the American people on pay for federal workers. We saw on last Friday the House staffers not get paid for the first time in the government shutdown.
Yeah.
And so, we were talking about the mundane, everyday part of the shutdown on Capital Conversations week after week. Federal workers that are furloughed or not receiving pay are not eligible for unemployment. I think that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Oh, yeah,
because
I didn't know that.
They will get back pay. So they're not technically unemployed unless they do get let go during the shutdown or somewhat, depending on what the Office of Management and Budget does, the longer that the shutdown goes on. But they're not allowed to apply for unemployment. There's a lot of restrictions on second jobs that they can have, the amount of hours that they can work, what job that is. There are restrictions around that. So it's not only that they're not getting paid, they're also not really given the option to make up that money in a lot of ways.
Damn, so they're really getting screwed just from all angles.
And I've seen a lot of people turn to TikTok. We've talked about it so many times. With the new media, we talked about it when the shutdown first started, how we got so many texts from our friends back at home in Illinois and Texas saying that they found out about the shutdown from TikTok. Now I'm on the side of TikTok that is all these federal workers, regardless of if they're essential workers, they're still working without pay or they're furloughed. And they're kind of going to TikTok to, one, either show what they're doing during the government shutdown when they're not getting paid, show the struggles that they're having, or I saw this girl who she started making videos on day 19, and I did the story on the 28th day of the shutdown. So not even a week and a half after she had started making videos. And the video that she posted the day that I wrote the story was she had already made up half of her rent through just posting TikTok videos.
That's nuts.
And going viral. She had almost 60,000 followers.
Are we in the wrong profession?
Yeah, that's what Chris said. Whenever our boss said that, he was I think I'm in the wrong profession.
Yes.
I was me too. But it's crazy because it does provide some form of income, regardless of if you're making money from ads or TikTok, directly from being in the creator fund. It also provides a lot of opportunity. I talked to another federal worker who's been making TikToks, and she said that people have been DMing her and asking if they could buy her morning coffee or stuff like that.
Aww.
Or I watched this really sad video of this mom on TikTok where she was just crying because she had to go in and she had to buy her kids Halloween costumes, and she's I don't want my kids to feel the pain of this government shutdown, but I also don't want them to miss out on Halloween, but I can't afford it. And all the comments were drop your Venmo, I'll pay for your kid's Halloween costume.
Aww.
So I think regardless of if you are making money directly through TikTok or ads, I do think that it's providing some sort of A, relief, to support, or like the girl that I talked to that said that people have Venmoed her or like offered to buy her coffees, she said it just like helps her feel less alone because there's other people going through it, or like she wants to also make other people feel less alone, and just like providing that human connection that a lot of times traditional news doesn't provide. But I do think it's really interesting that these people are able to like make some form of ends meet from social media or like outreach on TikTok.
I think it's just, and we've talked about this a ton, but just how social media has carried the story of the shutdown to every community. And we've talked about how like our families have reached out and friends have reached out. And I think that what I'm finding to be so crazy is that we are hearing from people that we don't even know saying, you know, oh, like I heard through the shutdown, like through your show. Cool, thanks, we love that. But they're also saying we've also heard it through TikTok, or we've heard it through Twitter, or, you know, what other platforms people are using. And so Lauren and I actually did kind of a fun little experiment. We reached out to our government teachers from high school because we were like, we want to know a lot. We want to know, what are you teaching your students? What are you explaining to them about the shutdown? Like you're in an unprecedented time where the stuff that you're teaching that's really vital to them learning about the civic nature of our country, you have a real world experience now to show them, whereas a lot of other times, you know, they probably had to refer back. Like when we were in high school, that was, for me, that was to be the end of, or I'm sorry, the beginning of.
I said, like year one of Trump 1.
Year one of Trump 1, and also the 2018-2019 shutdown. I was in my freshman year of college for that. And it was so crazy as looking back, I didn't even know we were in a shutdown.
I was about to say, I was a senior during the 2019 shutdown, and I don't remember hearing about it now that I think about it.
I didn't hear anything about it. And so I just...
But it was a partial shutdown.
It was a partial shutdown, so it wasn't as, I think, as harsh as maybe it is right now. But we had reached out to him, we asked, and so I'll probably be referencing to my laptop here because there's a lot of things that we talked about. But one of the things that my government teacher, Mr. McClish, shout out him, he's awesome, he had talked about that in his classroom. He teaches about, he wants his students to look at the budget process for...
So crucial.
Which is so crucial. And talking about how like they need to go through, and he said that he is teaching them like mandatory versus discretionary spending. And I just like laughed because that is just such a part of our lives that we had to learn about. That like, what a great opportunity for students to learn what these really key things are.
Seriously.
During a shutdown that depends on this mandatory versus discretionary spending. And I think that this is just a really great opportunity for government teachers to educate their students on what they're learning in the classroom can easily be applied to in real life.
I mean, I think that we are example A of what they learn in the classroom being applied to real life. I didn't want to go into politics until I took Miss Woodley's government class my senior year, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. I ended up minoring in political science because of that class, and like, look at us here now, we're political nerds.
Yeah,
but
for
I
real.
think that they provide a really interesting take because they have been in it longer than us. Like we said, we were young, like the last shutdown happened, we weren't really politically cognizant.
No.
But I do think that like the way that they teach has to have shifted since pre-Trump to now. Like, not only has Trump changed things, but like we said, we're breaking record after record after record this Congress. So like obviously things are shifting, things are changing, and I think that like the way that they look at things and the way they teach things are probably changing with it. I'll literally never forget this. This was like one of the first things that I walked into Miss Woodley's class, and I was like, I'm gonna love this class. She's literally the best teacher ever. But on the wall, she has, the threat to any democracy is the apathy of its own people, which essentially is saying that like if people lack passion in a democracy, the democracy will fail. And I do think that we are seeing a lot of passion right now.
Yes.
And I think that passion is what got us into this government shutdown, coming from both sides, feeling extremely passionate about what they believe in, which is kind of leading to why we don't have a negotiating table, which is a problem in itself and could be an argument for our democracy.
Just passion for passion's sake is great. It fuels arguments, it fuels debate, it fuels participation, and that's great. But I think almost too much passion and not enough listening, I think
it puts you at a standstill.
It puts you at a standstill, and that's the thing. And kind of going back to what you were saying about just how this shutdown is just seeping into like people's just everyday lives, and how we're seeing so many people, regular people on social media, just engaging with people who are affected by this. one of the things that Mr. McClish did when I remember this from when I was in high school, is like every day he would come in and we would just sit there and he'd be like, all right, kids, like, what's happening on the streets? Like, what are you hearing from me? And I remember so clearly, if no one had anything, we sat there until someone said something. And I think it really encouraged us as, you know, young adults, almost 18, you know, to go out there and actually learn and not just rely on the textbook, to make sure that you're putting it into real life action. And that's something that he always, and I remember this when he was teaching me, when I talked to him about it recently, like he had said, you know, what is the point of me teaching you if you can't apply it in real life? And so what was so cool is that he told me that the other day, students came in and they were like, yeah, like we are really educated and we heard about like Mike Johnson not opening up the government. And I was like, well, first of all, that's funny for so many reasons. One, it doesn't really work like that. And two, but just the fact that they knew about that. The fact that they heard about Mike Johnson in a town in Illinois, like the fact that that is a conversation that they have, and the fact that they brought it to class to talk about is, I think, very, very interesting, because I don't know, I don't recall myself or even my like cohort when I was in high school being so in tune with the people in power.
No, not at all.
But now people are, and I think it's partially because the shutdown is impacting everyday people now, but it's also because of that social media tide that it's easy to get that information.
It's crazy.
And I think teachers are in a great, unique position where they are the ones who get to kind of shape their students to learn, you know, where to find information, how to make sure it's not partisan, you know, how to take away the political noise and come to the root of the issue.
Speaking of are like, especially, I mean, your political beliefs are shaped by the people closest to you. They're shaped by your parents, they're shaped by your teachers, but like you said, like whenever you're learning about government for the first time, like they are shaping a lot of your perception of how government works, which is so interesting, because whenever I texted my previous government teacher, she broke down this shutdown into like her thoughts as a government teacher, and then her thoughts as of right now. As a government teacher, she recognizes the necessity of using like the only times whenever you can compromise in a trifecta is during government funding, and she's like compromise is the key to any democracy, is what she said.
Yeah.
And she's like, so I do understand as a government teacher that in a trifecta that compromise is a necessity, and this is one of the only times for compromise. But then she said that if we're not compromising, then we're in trouble. And I was like, that is just like exactly where we are right now.
Yeah.
Is like they're seeing compromising as a necessity in a trifecta. Nobody's compromising, so we're in trouble, and it is irresponsible because people are being hurt all across the country.
And I think that that's a discussion topic or a classroom, you know, objective that you wouldn't really know to teach unless you were in the middle of it.
Totally.
Because when you're looking at the past, you know, and like when you're learning from history, like you're reading all these history books, and there's no real present day scenario that you can connect it to. But now you're teaching your students about the bureaucracy, and you're teaching them about how the separation of powers, and you're teaching them about all these different things, to have a time in our life where I think all of those institutions are being challenged from several different ways. You've got court challenges, you know, that some for the first time ever to repeal important laws like the Voting Rights Act. And then you had, you know, and then back when like the abortion, you know, when that was overturned, like that was a big deal. So like, I think that our generation has been very lucky, maybe unlucky too. I don't know how, if it depends on how you look at it, but I feel like we've been very fortunate education-wise to have all of these key moments happening. Because for so long we were educated about how everything worked in the 1700s and the 1800s and even the 1900s. And then you come now to this time where every institution that is written in a history textbook is now being challenged by our leaders.
I mean, I think that that's what people want now, though. I've had a lot of conversations recently, regardless of if it's like new candidates, like we've seen Zoran Mamdani in New York, or even Trump. I know that he's not a new candidate, but these people are coming in and they're really challenging the institution, and like they are charismatic, and they are really like, regardless of if people connect with them on like policy-wise, or like, I always go back to split ticket voters that voted for Trump and AOC. Those are such fascinating voters to me, because I think that we've gotten to a point where like, yes, people do vote for policy, but a lot of people vote based on like charisma and passion and just like candidates that challenge the institution. And I think that these candidates challenge the institution, and that's why they do so well, regardless if they support unpopular policy.
I don't think a single teacher has probably been bored since Trump showed up.
No.
In like good or bad way. Like I think that he just is constantly having like
I haven't been bored.
No. I wish I was bored.
I've been tired.
But like I think that Trump has come onto the scene and he has given, you know, government teachers, economic teachers. I think it just really seeps into everything. I mean, I won't pretend to know anything about economy. Love my high school, but that was the one subject that didn't stick really well with me. But like I think it is fascinating to see how these key figures are really seeping into like everyday high school student conversations. Because to us, it's so big because it's part of our job.
Yeah.
Our job every day is to go and report on these people. But when you're in high school, you know, you're learning so many different things. And then you get to your government class, and that's like your maybe one class of the day that gives you the dose of reality of what's going on in the world. And, you know, and a lot of times like teachers have to adhere to like, you know, if you take an AP class, there's like the college board. Oh my God, the college board, I heard about that so much in high school. I literally think I'm getting PTSD from it. But like there was only so many things that you could teach because you had to make sure students were ready for that AP test. But I think one of the things that I loved so much about like Mr. McClish and other teachers that I had for AP classes is that, and I don't even think they ever really said it like this, but this was just like the tone was like, yeah, we want you guys to pass the AP test. Like obviously we want you guys to get into college. But like if you're just doing this just to take an AP test and then be done, then like I don't really have any interest in teaching you because like we want you to take the stuff you learn here and apply it to your real life.
Yeah.
And so like he was telling me that he thinks that a lot of teachers should really hone in on like campaign finance. Such a niche topic. But so niche, but like something that like
I would take that.
But I would take that class because when you think about it, like you think about how much money was funneled into these elections.
Billions.
You know, billions of dollars, and money matters. Money matters about how some of these grassroots candidates who start out really small are able to rise to this huge thing. I mean, someone like Mamdani, he is a grassroots candidate. That's what he's pledged himself on. But now he is known by everyone.
He's known nationwide.
Yes, he is.
It's honestly been so fascinating to watch. I've never in my life seen a mayoral race reach one so far across the country, but also like affect leaders of Washington. Like I can't even think of a time or like name a time that a mayoral candidate, not even mayor of a city yet, was named by the president, the speaker, the Senate majority leader.
Day.
Wild. Absolutely wild.
It is wild. And we've seen like mayor candidates rise up. Like Pete Buttigieg, like we've seen that happen.
He made it to the cabinet secretary.
Yeah, and he was big while he was mayor, but like, and again, we had admitted we weren't super.
He made a presidential run.
Yeah, but like when he was running for mayor, I won't say that you and I were super keyed into that at all. I would make that guess. And even when he was mayor, I didn't really know that much about it.
Didn't.
The only time I really knew about Mayor Pete was when the presidential stuff started kicking in, and so then he had a little bit more spotlight on him. And then you go back and learn about all the great things he did, you know, for his city, and then you were like, wow, like he actually was like a great candidate. Like where did he come from? Like out of nowhere. But Mamdani is interesting because the second he started running, you know, if people had ignored him, would he have done so well?
Which I mean, I do think that it is interesting. Like New York is the largest city. It has massive economic effects on the entire world, not just the U.S. So I do see why the focus does go there, and I think that him actively labeling himself as a socialist also did add to that. I think that a lot of far left,
kind of a clickbait
progressive Democrats don't even touch the socialism label. That is a big label to put on yourself, especially running for us. Like, I mean, everyone knew Eric Adams. Is the mayor still technically of New York City. So I do think that like it is a pretty high profile election, but I mean, it's still wild. It's not a statewide elected position. It's not anywhere near a federally nationwide elected official, and I think that he has the name recognition at this point of like Chuck Schumer or Mike Johnson. Like he's up there, and like all these people are getting clips of him, and he's going viral on everything. And my friends across the country are reaching out and asking me about Mamdani, which is wild because if I asked them the senators of their own state, they'd probably be like, I don't know.
They'd be like, I don't even know who my representative is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is just interesting how kids, people our age who don't live in Washington, are just able to connect to all of this stuff. And I think that just kind of goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning of this show, is that the shutdown is just kind of seeping into everybody's lives in very different ways. And I think it all depends on their, you know, TikTok algorithm, or depends on who they follow on social media. So their opinions of it. And I think that that's also what makes like teachers so important, kind of just going in different circles here, because, you know, social media now we've talked about is so prevalent that you could easily stay on your belief board.
It's an echo chamber, for sure.
And never move. But then I think what is kind of great, and that's what's so wonderful about just schooling in general. We're giving schooling a huge shout out here. But like when that in a classroom, everyone has to come together and you have to listen to the basics. You have to listen to the nonpartisan way the government works. You have to be informed. And that's why I think like teachers that we've had, I think have really shaped us as journalists, even if they didn't intend to. Like, I don't think like Mr. McClish was intending on shaping me as a journalist. Like, and I don't think your teacher was either. But like as a journalist, you know, it's our job to be nonpartisan and to report the facts. And I think that going back and having such a great education system that taught us how to do that, I think a lot of students are very fortunate now. Then they're being tested for sure, because this is a very hyperpartisan environment.
I mean, I think that I miss that aspect of looking at politics. I think that, like we said, the echo chambers of social media and how accessible it is to just stay in your own lane and hear what you want to hear is what got us in this shutdown. Like that, like point blank, period. That is, in my opinion, what got us in this shutdown. We are in this hyper-partisan era that everyone is so mad at the other side or wants something so bad that they're not even willing to come to the table. And that has stemmed from hyper-partisanship. And I mean, in my opinion, hyper-partisanship is directly like related to social media and people being able to completely distance themselves and separate themselves from the other side, which makes those conversations not happen. Which, I mean, I think that everyone should take a government class as an adult and kind of come back down to earth, and then maybe we will reopen the government and everyone will be in a better place.
Yeah, and like looking ahead for this week, like just for everybody, we are looking at negotiations like ramping up. Like we're hearing from Democrats. We heard about it last week. Democrats are saying that negotiations were ongoing and that, you know, they were making some progress. Republicans have largely not given many updates. They've just said, you know, on the House side, we've done our job. We've heard that a lot. On the Senate side, they're like, we've asked to bring standalone bills. They've said no. We will talk to them about it after the CR. They've said no. I think that we are going to see a lot more movement. I won't promise that the shutdown's going to end this week. We don't know. That's, I think, the thing, too, that I wish that we were able to share with people is that, you know, we have some inside information. But even some of the reporters I know that are been doing this for 20 years and they are right on the inside, they are even saying, we don't know what's going on. We're waiting. And so
I think a lot of it will fall also into the hands of President Trump. Like, he really does control the entire party. He's the president of the United States, of course he does. But he was in Asia all last week doing a tour of Asia, meeting with leaders, and he got back late last week. Obviously, the Congress is home for the weekend. And so I think that this week with President Trump back in the country and like them kind of starting to see some movement on some negotiations, even if it is like literally the most minuscule move, I think that President Trump is like really who Democrats want to meet with. They're like, we want President Trump to get involved, which is also really notably wild of them to be saying. Like, when have we ever heard Democrats be like, we want to talk with President Trump? But I do think that like with him getting back and him being here, I think that we could see some movement there. I mean, people are feeling pain, and I think that everyone's starting to realize that.
Yes, I agree.
Well, up next, we have an interview with Congressman Johnny O, who is actually a former government teacher. Okay, well, hi, Congressman. Welcome to Capitol Conversations. We're so excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
I know that there's obviously a lot of craziness going on with the government shutdown, and being from Maryland, there are a lot of federal workers in your district. Can you just talk to me a little bit about the effects that you've seen in your district with such a heavy federal workforce?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. In Maryland, we have a significant federal workforce. In my district alone, over 22,000 employees work for the federal government. And we've seen in Maryland over 15,000 of those employees who live in our state have already been fired, whether it was under DOGE or just other rifts done by this administration. Maryland's actually leading the country in terms of firings already. And so what we've already seen is that there's been a lot of hurt and displacement. And now with the government shutdown and families not getting paid who remain working or who are furloughed at this point, we know that people don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage, how they're going to put food on their table for their children. And so we've seen a very significant impact here in Maryland based on those facts.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like we're heading into another week of this shutdown, and it seems like it's never ending. What, as a member, are you doing in your district while there's a shutdown? Because I think a lot of people don't really understand what happens, and we've talked a lot about on the show about how people don't really understand that when the government shuts down, it's not like everything goes dark. Like there's still things happening. Can you talk a little bit about what you specifically do in your district while there is a shutdown? And now that we're heading into November, what you think the shutdown's going to look like, during this month?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. I am keeping very busy. As your listeners may or may not know, I represent Maryland's second district, which is the Baltimore area, largely Baltimore County, a little bit of Baltimore City and Carroll County. So on a good day, it's about an hour and a half commute to DC. On other days, it's 2 to 2.5 hours. But I'm really going back and forth, both in my district office as well as my DC office, supporting my staff who continue to work without pay alongside federal workers. It's why I chose to forego a salary as a member of Congress so long as the shutdown continues. I don't think it's right for us to get paid while federal employees aren't being paid. But I can tell you that we are out there meeting the need. We're working with food banks and other organizations that are distributing aid. I was with the mayor of Baltimore earlier this week where we announced additional resources for food security, for rental assistance, for childcare, for those impacted federal workers. So we're getting the calls. We're seeing the need. It is significant. A lot of workers are now taking on second jobs if they're allowed to, doing Uber or bartending or just sort of whatever they can to make ends meet. We know a lot of our federal employees are working paycheck to paycheck. And unfortunately, in this shutdown, they are very clearly being used as political pawns. We're seeing it on our workforce. We're seeing it with things like SNAP benefits that are set to expire. And so it's really hard for me as a member of Congress to see it. But we're out there in the community, again, taking calls, going to press events, going to food banks, working with our partners out there to just try to be as helpful as we can in this moment. But also sounding the alarm that really this is now week 5, I think, that the House has been out of session. And it's really frustrating because there is, in addition to the impacts for workers, we know that people who rely on those services across this country are being impacted. People who rely on the benefits are about to be impacted. And in the midst of all that, we're spending zero time at the table. No one's talking to each other. The president is traveling abroad. Speakers canceled sessions in the House for weeks. And so Americans are facing a cost of living crisis. So we're not only not negotiating opening up the government, we're also just not talking about the crushing cost of electricity or groceries or, you name it. So it's been really hard, but we're keeping very busy.
There's been, obviously, you talked about, there's been a lot of movement in Maryland whenever it comes to federal workers with stuff like that. But I mean, the other news that has come recently, aside from the government shutdown, is redistricting across the country. Maryland has had some pretty big news in recent weeks about kind of denying doing some of these redistricting efforts. I kind of have a 2-part question here.
Sure.
I'm just kind of asking from your perspective what this redistricting effort looks like in Maryland. And then we talked to Congressman Mike Levin a few weeks back, and he expressed a fear that redistricting is going to be the new norm in every midterm, in every general, and that we're like across the country, this like big blow up is just going to start to happen every election cycle. Is that a fear that you have, number one? And two, can you just kind of break down what's happening in your state?
Yeah, I'll try to start big and I'll come down more local. Before I came to Congress, I was an American government teacher. And if I were in the classroom with my high school students now, I would be losing my mind with them, just as I'm losing my mind with this president and these states across the country. Because let's just be clear, I don't think that politicians should choose the people they represent. People should choose the politicians that represent them. And to be clear, this all started because President Trump called into Texas in a mid-cycle, mid-decade, unprecedented request to redistrict in Texas. And it sort of led off this chain reaction where then California responded in kind, and now states across the country. And I think it's absolutely wrong. It's screaming for federal reform so that we have less partisan districts across this country, because it's not healthy to have states where all Republicans are represented, where Democrats make up 30-40% of the electorate. In the same way, it's not good in states like Maryland are overwhelmingly Democratic. It's deeply concerning if you're going to have 100% of a delegation be represented intentionally, right? But we're seeing it in response. And so the question becomes, Democrats have felt like we've been supporting, and I've throughout my career supported electoral reforms to make redistricting nonpartisan, and to not do things like mid-decade redistricting. I'm on that bill. I think Representative Kiley, a Republican in California, put forward to prevent that nationally. So I think we should be doing those kinds of things nationally, so that we're not in this impossible situation where we're asking ourselves, and this is the conversation in Maryland of, well, we know what's happening is wrong across the country, but does Maryland respond in kind to what an Indiana, for example, is doing, or what a Utah is doing, or what, sort of fill in the blank of what other sort of Republican-led states are doing in response to this call from President Trump? I don't know how the story is going to end in Maryland. It's ultimately a call of our legislature and our governor. Our speaker and governor have sort of indicated a desire, I think, to do something on this issue. Our Senate president has expressed reservations, both on, I think, substance, but also Maryland courts have actually thrown out a prior map. So there was some concern there. I don't know how that ends. At the end of the day, my job is to sort of represent the people I have. And if that changes, I'm ready to do that. But I don't think what's happening is right. It should not be happening in Texas. It should not be happening in California. On principle, it's wrong. And so as Congress, as congressional leaders, we should all be stepping forward. And this is one more place where it's like, come on, guys, like, let's talk, let's figure it out. But the truth of the matter is Republicans and Democrats just haven't been doing that. We've unfortunately been sort of segregated and put in our corners. And so that's true on this issue. It's true on the shutdown. And I'm hoping to be part of a new crop of leaders in Congress that actually changes that, because I think what's happening is wrong.
You said something interesting there that I think is so fun, is that you used to be an American government teacher. And I was actually talking to people the other day about how my favorite in high school was American government and US history. And it's so funny to me to be now here in DC, like experiencing all the things that in the classroom, I was like, wow, like that's so far off. And then I'm here now and I'm like, oh, it's actually not that glamorous at all. What is one thing that you taught your students that when you came to Congress, you were like, I'm so glad I taught them that? And then what was one thing that now that you're in Congress, you're like, oh, every American government classroom should know this?
I mean, I would say I'm glad that I taught my students about rule of law and separation of powers. And I think that Congress is truly abdicating our power of the purse, our co-equal branch. I've had conversations, and look, this isn't a judgment, but I know that some of my Republican colleagues feel differently about things, whether it's tariff or the healthcare ACA subsidies. Some people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Josh Hawley just wrote there are Republicans who are starting to speak up. But the number of conversations where either directly or indirectly, people have said, I can't take action because I'm afraid of President Trump. And what that means, either sometimes, most often, I think it's because of the concerns about what that means electorally for them. I think sometimes people are genuinely concerned about the safety and well-being of their family. But like you said, Rachel, this is nothing like what we taught in the textbooks. But I'm glad that my students know that we're supposed to follow the Constitution. We're supposed to follow laws, that Congress is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government. I think one of the most striking things that people said to me early on is that, Johnny O, like, don't worry, like, it hasn't always been this way, about the partisanship, about the lack of action by Congress. But my response is always, well, that's great, because that means it doesn't have to stay this way either. And we can get back to a place where we actually, A, start working together again, and B, start delivering for the American people in a way that is sensible and that actually meets the needs. And the needs are crushing. We are in a cost, I said earlier, we're in a cost of living crisis. It's been almost 300 days we've been in session. Not one single vote that actually lowers the cost of living for hardworking Americans. If anything, we've seen cost of living go up throughout our time here. And so that's actually been the most frustrating thing, is that, so many of us campaigned on making the cost of gas and groceries and prescription drugs and healthcare lower. But now we're doing the exact opposite of that, either not taking action or affirmatively letting things like healthcare spike by thousands of dollars a year. And for a working family, that's crushing. So, but yeah, those are the things I'd say. I think rule of law and the separation of power are the things that I'm most glad that I taught. I don't know that they are necessarily being lived out currently in the ways I want to see.
To kind of build off that real quick, you had said that, you campaign and a lot of people campaigned on bringing the cost of living down. And I think a lot of people, and especially when Lauren and I talk to people at home or just people in different states, they are confused why Congress just can't do that. And especially for Democrats, like how do you explain to constituents, or maybe if you're traveling with other members and you're going to their districts and you're explaining to them, how do you explain to them, like, look, we're in the minority. So we did campaign on this. But there's only so much we can do because we can't, bring bills to the floor just like that. Like, how do you kind of have those conversations? And do you think people are understanding of that? Or is there just kind of this overarching blanket of confusion?
A little bit of both. Part of it's incumbent on us to both explain that what being in a trifecta minority means, right? So it's not just that we're in the minority in the House and we can't bring a bill forward, that there's a minority in the Senate and the president has the power of the veto pen. So we're really sort of in a disadvantage when it comes to getting anything done. I'm proud that I've passed a couple of bills in a bipartisan fashion already, working with people like Roger Williams, the chair of my small business committee. We sort of scrap it up and joke about our differences on the baseball field, which I actually think has helped us sort of find common ground in committee. But then Bill Huizenga in Michigan, we passed a port security bill. There are issues out there where we can make progress, but on these big issues, especially about healthcare, childcare, housing, has been really hard. And I think we have an obligation as Democrats to convey to the people we represent, to convey to the American people that we are not in charge. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pushing for these issues, though. And so I think that's the other place where Democrats, and that I'm trying to lean into, is to be more forceful about, we have to Maslow hierarchy this thing a little bit, where being so intentional about meeting the basic needs, because I've sort of argued if people cannot afford their rent, if they can't literally put food on the table for their kids, if they can't afford childcare, if they can't afford their medicine, no other issue matters. Like no one's going to care about gun safety or immigration or fill in the blank if we're not addressing their day-to-day experience. And if you're struggling to just make ends meet and you're worried about, I've got a 10-year-old daughter, if I'm worried about where she's going to get her next meal, it's hard for me as a person who's just going to work every day. And maybe I'm a federal employee now who's not getting paid on top of that. Right. How am I supposed to then? And so I think it's both, right? We convey we're not in charge, but we are pushing for making your cost of living lower. And here are all the bills. And, I can talk about the childcare subsidies and the housing bills and the things like creating jobs, fair wages, all the bills that we're on, but we have to be proactive about that. And I think for far too long, we've sort of just been reactive. And I can run through a litany of things that are terrible and scary about what Donald Trump has done. And we shouldn't stop doing that, but we can't just be anti-Trump. People also want to have us be for something, I think.
Yeah, you talked about how y'all are in the minority, and then obviously you are newer to Congress. How has it been being new to Congress in a time where we had a reconciliation bill, we have a trifecta, we now have almost a record-shattering government shutdown? What has that experience been like for you, and has it been disheartening at all?
Very. So for your listeners out there, I come to this work as someone who was Baltimore County executive before coming to Congress. I led basically a county and a city all in one. We had no municipalities or cities, but we had almost 1 million people, and we did everything. We did healthcare, we did police, fire, we supported our schools, we did recreation, we did permitting, zoning, trash, you name it, we did it, right? And I had a council that had 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So we were split, just happened to have a slight Democratic majority versus being in the minority. We did really impressive things together. We passed balanced budgets. We found efficiencies. We paid record funding to our public employees. We created new transit options. We did bipartisan gun safety reforms. We did police reforms in a bipartisan way. But we came together, and almost every single vote, I think just about every vote we ever took, had Democrats and Republicans supporting it. And so my perspective coming into Congress was great. Like, if we just talk to each other and recognize that in the end of the day, like, Republicans aren't my enemy. They have a different worldview, but so I just know, but I know it's possible. right? So, and I think that's been the most frustrating thing for me is I know what's possible because I did it leading a jurisdiction of 1 million people. And yeah, we had the full range of ideology on that council. And sometimes the alliances would be different, but everyone felt heard. And it was never about just jamming stuff up. And so when I come to DC and I see a bill that is loaded up with the largest wealth transfer in our country's history from the working class to the ultra wealthy, when I see one of the largest increases to our deficit in our country's history, when I see $300 billion taken away from food security and SNAP benefits for veterans and children and seniors, when I see healthcare taken away from millions of Americans, it's just like, what are we doing here? And to be completely sidelined on all of these major policy issues, and these are the things that I think Americans are most interested in. That's really hard. So the partisanship, the lack of progress, the way in which it's sort of, we're going to just like take full advantage and go. I think this is why Congress has such a low approval rating. I think it's why people are frustrated with, and to your points earlier, it's not what you read about in the history books. It's not what you're taught in your American government class. I mean, I don't know the last time we've seen it. I don't know if I've seen a conference committee on a bill. Like we're supposed to have senators and representatives come together if there are differences and hash it out, but that's not like, it's just sort of like, we're being told by leadership. And, you know, we teach people that we're supposed to do these appropriation processes where we have these bills that are passed that fund the government, but we've been operating under CRs for so long that people are forgetting what the normal appropriations process looks like. And I know it's not normal, and I've only been here 9 months. So it's been hard. It's been frustrating. It's not been my experience. And it's been just a lot of hyper partisanship and frankly, people wanting to be performative instead of actually making progress. It's about what's the craziest stuff I can say to go viral, to end up on MSNBC or Fox News, instead of let's figure this stuff out and make some progress together. So it's been hard, especially given sort of where I came from.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have to hop off here in a second, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today on Capitol Conversations.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Thanks for lifting up these conversations for folks across the country. We appreciate it.
Welcome to our Q&A section, our favorite part. And our question is from Sophia, and it is, what races should we be watching tomorrow?
Great question.
Great question. There's several.
We love elections over here. Obviously, we got into this for a reason. So I feel like the first week of November is 1, my birthday, and 2, always election week. So
great week.
I feel like I was born to go into this profession.
Absolutely. You're already locked and loaded. Yeah. So the first race that I think to mention is New Jersey. I'll actually be in New Jersey tomorrow covering it, so check out my coverage. But basically in New Jersey, we have a governor's race. It is Mikey Sherrill and it is Jack Ciattarelli, and they are running to become the new governor of New Jersey. They will be succeeding Phil Murphy, who is retiring, so he can't run for another term. He's term limited. And so the biggest thing I think to watch is whether there's an upset from Ciattarelli, because it's a blue state right now. There's a blue governor of New Jersey. If Sherrill wins, it's kind of just continuing on New Jersey's blue trend. Trump came within a margin of winning the state last year.
Which is wild.
Significantly more than he did against Biden in 2020.
I think he picked up like 8 points. Something crazy.
Something crazy. He came within like 5 or 6 in 2024, and Harris still won.
For a solid blue state is very close.
It's very indicative of just like where the electorate is right now.
I mean, like one of the biggest campaign talking points was high energy costs from both sides in New Jersey. I did a story on that. I used to be an energy reporter, so I dip my toes in the water every once in a while there, but that's a pretty crazy, like, big talking point for them, because you don't typically see energy at the top of the agenda for candidates, especially statewide or like national candidates. So I think that's pretty indicative of like messaging going into 2026, like what people are going to be looking at. We have a lot of other big races. We have Virginia governor's race, which also I think that Democrats do have a even bigger advantage in Virginia than they do in New Jersey for the governor's race, not necessarily for the attorney general race. Glenn Youngkin, he is a Republican he's the governor right now of Virginia. He's a Republican, but in Virginia, they are only allowed to serve 1 term at a time, which is wild to me.
Crazy.
I think that is kind of crazy.
Especially coming from Illinois, where like my governor is preparing to run for a 3rd term.
Exactly. So it is pretty crazy that does shift every term. But Abigail Spanberger is looking like she's going to take that seat tomorrow. We look at California that has the redistricting on the map to redistrict California into pick up 5 seats to kind of cancel out Texas's redistricting, which took out 5 Democratic seats. It is Proposition 50, and it is on the California ballot. It needs a simple majority to pass, and it's looking like that'll pass. I know that Obama stepped in and started campaigning in that race, which is huge. I think that it is notable that Newsom and Obama have been campaigning together, not with Vice President Kamala Harris on Proposition 50.
She's been doing her own thing. Harris has supported Prop 50, but not with the two of them.
Newsom and Obama, which I do think is kind of notable in that, but that's looking like it's going to pass. And then, I mean, we have, like we said, Mamdani, who is also looking like he's going to sail to victory.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of Democrats come out in the recent weeks saying that they endorse him versus not endorsing him. We had a lot of centrist Democrats come out very early on that they were not going to endorse him. Tom Suozzi endorsed Andrew Cuomo in June, but then, last week put out another thing emphasizing why he was endorsing him over Mamdani. And so I think that it's going to be a very interesting race, not in the sense that it's going to be a surprise that Mamdani wins. I just think I'm curious to see what the vote, like the actual vote breakdown is.
Yes.
I want to see how much he wins, because there has been a lot of money pumped into this race. Republicans are I don't think Republicans are running in this race thinking that they're going to upset it. I don't think that there's even an avenue to do so.
No.
But I think just calling attention to it, the biggest thing will be seeing the Cuomo and Mamdani numbers. That'll be the biggest thing I'm looking at.
Very nerdy of me, but I'm really excited for post-election polling to come out from New York to see how people really feel and see why people voted, what they were voting for, and who voted.
Yes.
I'm really excited for that coming forward, but there's a lot coming up this week. There's a lot with elections and government funding, but that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capitol Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And as always, make sure to like and subscribe, follow our show on Spotify, on YouTube, whatever platform suits your fancy, and make sure to read at washingtonexaminer.com.